Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. We're going to be doing another weekly roundup of meta-analysis. What is going on with all of the specializations in World of Warcraft? Which ones are looking like big winners? Have there been any shifts? And most importantly, we're providing a video to those that are so obsessed with leaving some sort of hate comment to retail World of Warcraft, saying that it is a dead game in the comments section. I just wanted to make sure there was a video for them to post on because I feel like that is the highlight of their day. But let's get started. We're going to be looking at the melee DPS first of all, breaking it down on each different rating threshold. So from 1500 to 1800, you can see that there has been a pretty big meta shift when it comes to melee DPS. Ret Paladins, they've fallen off. Demon Hunters are starting to take over the show at low ratings, which honestly I found to be pretty surprising. I thought that Ret Paladins would continue to dominate. It's not like they aren't, though. They're still in second place here at 10% of the representation. Fury Warrior seeing a little bit of an upsurge at low ratings, which was surprising because I think that Fury Warrior has definitely fallen off on overall power. I would start ranking it a lot lower at the moment, a lot more difficult to succeed on. Assassination Rogue and Subtlety Rogue are very healthy at this low rating bracket, which is atypical. Rogue specs are usually very underpopulated at the low rating, which means that Rogue is becoming increasingly more accessible, which has been one of their major goals with the class changes aimed, I think, directly at Subtlety. A little bit less so with Assassination, but Assassination's always been a great spec to pick up as a beginner. Windwalker Monk still holds solid through the middle of the pack here. A great pick overall, a decent level of difficulty from kind of beginner to medium. Unholy DK and Frost DK, I was expecting Frost DK to be more represented at low rating at this point, but Unholy still actually holds above it. Frost being more bursty, low-rated players not knowing how to play around it. I would have expected it to be stronger as far as a performer here. This might be kind of a personal preference, though, for players between those two specializations. Feral Druid, honestly, is pretty high on representation at low rating because it's very difficult to play. I've been actually playing it a little bit because on stream you guys gift 5 subs to make me play it because you know that I hate playing it, but I'm actually increasingly getting better at it, and maybe I'm actually starting to like it. But it's doing pretty well here. It's definitely a top performer spec at the highest level, but at low rating it's actually still doing at least a solid job, right, with all these specs within spitting different distance of each other. Enhancement and survival, less popular at this rating. I think a lot of players, you know, there's a lot of talk about these specs being underperformers. So if you're a beginner player and you're watching a tier list, you've probably been deterred to try these specs. But I think when we get to the highest rating, you're going to see some pretty surprising results. But I think that's generally kind of sentiment towards these specs. Also, Marksman and Beastmaster are so strong, so it's like, why play survival? Enhance is just very cumbersome with the amount of keybinds that it has, and it's definitely not performing as well. I'd really like to see Enhancement Shaman get something similar to Ret Paladins. I actually don't even know why Rets have it. They don't even need it. I think it's like Hallowed Ground, where when you get Consecration, it removes snares from you. It's just this circle on the ground that passively removes slows. You can have free movement. It's crazy powerful. When I started playing it on my Ret Paladin journey to 2400, Enhancement Shaman should have something like that you put on the ground that gets everybody to move out of snares. That's what they need. It's what they've needed for so long to be viable. So some type of PP talent like that Paladin has to Shaman would definitely go a long way. And unfortunately, Outlaw Rogue, you guys just got giga nerfed. This spec is going to be the hardest one, I think, for my 2400 challenge. I have to re-gear and get haste gear before I really kind of undertake it seriously. But you're mostly just a little tickle monster. So, you know, it's not surprising to see the tickle monster this low on the bracket, especially at low ratings where you kind of need some ability that hits really hard to win games. So I'm not surprised to see this. It would have been nice to see some changes. You know, 11.1.7 is coming out tomorrow. Outlaw Rogue, I think, could have used a little bit of damage buffs on like its dispatch, maybe even its killing spree, just to make those numbers a little bit beefier. Same deal with Unholy. I still think they should buff Death Coil damage by a bit. Or bring up their disease damage even more. Just a couple of little tweaks there would have been nice. And then I don't know if it's just they kind of want Fury Warrior to be worse than ARMS right now. They've said in an update about the Chinese esports tournament that they had for DPS checks that they're kind of okay with making specs that are really dominant kind of just fall off for a bit. So it's possible they want Fury Warrior to fall off for a bit. I've seen that sentiment from a lot of Warrior players as well, but maybe that's the logic there. But I'd love to see some type of snare suppression talent for enhancement, bring back its synergy towards enabling Warriors and other melee DPS to get on their target, because it feels so good on Ret and it seems unnecessary because they're so range based, whereas Enhance has a lot of attacks from melee, and it would benefit greatly from having something like that. Now 1800, you can see there's a big swap up, right? Rets and Warriors start to take over, but it really moves a lot differently. Most of the same here. For every other specialization. Demon Hunter, Ret just swap places, and Warrior just takes over. From 2100 to 2400, Ret Paladin, Fury Warrior or Arms Warrior still carrying towards the top, although starting to come down maybe slightly. A lot of players really just not willing to let go of it. It's kind of like, what would they pick up instead, right? Now, I do think Windwalker is a strong competitor for these guys, but they just hit, the Warrior just hits so hard with the crits, like it's so satisfying, and then Ret just gets to do damage. It's just immune to so much CC. You have so much more activation to be able to get to your target. It really just feels like dirty fun relative to a lot of the other melee DPS, so I'm not surprised. But when you get to 2400, now you can start to see a shift, right? We can see now after a few weeks, and even with no class changes, right? Things are starting to trend a little bit differently. Rets and Warriors likely, being more easy to control, starting to fall off. Windwalkers are picking up. You can see Survival Hunter makes a big jump at the highest rating. It jumps up past most of the specializations that you'd expect to be riding high, right? You expect Feral Druid to be riding high at this bracket. Unfortunately, Outlaw Rogue, there's still zero of you, literally zero of you. So Outlaw definitely got hit really hard before, and maybe justifiably so with how strong it was, but it needs some compensation to bring it back up. Unfortunately, Enhance, you guys are still riding low. I still think some type of PP talent that gives you some sort of snare removal would go a really long way. Rogues, definitely falling off. They're actually less rogues at high rating than at low rating, which that might be the first time ever that I've seen a graph like that. And it's really surprising to see DKs more popular than rogues and ferals, because I would say that subtlety and feral are stronger. So this just goes to show that the game, you can make it work on pretty much any specialization except maybe Outlaw. Outlaw is kind of the meme right now when it comes to melee DPS. You're definitely going to be the underdog. So if you want something that's really challenging, that's the spec to go after if we're looking at the positive side. If you're looking at the negative side, this is probably the spec that you want to avoid, because it is going to be very difficult to actually achieve anything with it. When we look at range DPS at the low rating, we see Survival, Marksman. These guys have been the top two for a long time. They're just really good go-tos for range DPS. They continue to be. Elemental, Beast Mastery as well in the same positions here for this weekly update. Pretty much every single spec at this low rating is exactly where it was last time. Maybe Fire Mage is starting to uptick a little bit, which I think is fair, but Frost is just a better version. It's just the same amount of instant cast damage with more survivability and proc roots, right? Like the Frostbite root just needs to be nerfed in PvP, if not completely removed. It's just so dumb that you can get Frostbite rooted, break out of it, and instantly get ticked again, and Frostbite rooted again, just within a millisecond of breaking out of a root. It's just such an annoying mechanic. Og still rides at the bottom. It's kind of just the cheese spec. It's also maybe just not the coolest flavor of fantasy, so that's a big deal for representation and popularity, I think, on a graph like this. For 1800 to 2100, Frost really starts to surge, but we do see Beastmaster start catching up to Marksman, and I think, again, it's because they're so close in strength. Basically the same layout. Warlocks roughly about all equal with each other. A little bit of an armor increase for Affliction, I think, and maybe even possibly Destro would have been nice as well for some patch changes if I was going to do any types of tweaks, but it kind of seems like they're kind of done with that. Fire Mage, though, starts to fall off a bit at this point, but pretty much everything on this chart is following the same path as our last update. 2100 to 2400, though, as we get higher rated, you can see that other classes start to really show that they can control the meta, right? Ellie starts becoming more dominant. Shadow becomes a strong contender. Frost and Marksman are battling for supremacy with Beast Mastery to decide who's the best caster. Destro is actually on their heels. I was expecting Demonology, but Demonology is actually really far down here at the 2100 to 2400 bracket. But a lot of these range intermingling with each other week to week, even despite no changes, which means that the game is very balanced. The game is very balanced, except maybe Fire Mage and Outlaw Rogue and Og is kind of just like, how many people would be fine if they just kind of like deleted Og and maybe gave some of their cool mechanics to Dev Evoker, I'm kind of on board with that. But then we get to 2400. Hunters just completely take over. Marksman, Beastmaster, you guys just completely dominating at the highest rating brackets at the moment. And Mage kind of plummets, like Boomkin actually passes it. So again, just a testament to show, the balance of the game is in a pretty solid spot. And honestly, Destro is the number one Warlock spec, which is really surprising. I thought Demonology would have ended up being the number one spec. I have seen some players playing really weird builds with Destruction, with like running a lot of Mastery and getting massive Chaos Bolts. So I'm curious to see if anything comes of that. Ellie, I was not expecting to see this low. And Fire Mage actually starts to slowly catch up to Arcane at this bracket. So Affliction falls off more towards the top end, though. And Og is still obviously riding at the bottom. But you can tell that it's basically the best time to play anything, except maybe if you're a Fire Mage or an Outlaw Rogue. Those are kind of like the no-go zones, unless you want that challenge, which some people do. So maybe it's good to have a spec or two that's down there for players who actually want that underdog experience. Now, Healer balance is one I'm very curious to see, because I think it was the one that was already the closest. And we can see at the low ratings, this is all over the place. The Shaman one's bugged at the low rating, unfortunately, but Discipline actually is the bottom, depending on where Shaman is, which is very surprising. All of these specs are so competitive. Like Mistweaver's at the top. Prez is maybe still just a tiny bit weak, but like you can pretty much play anything that you want, which is excellent here at the low rating for the healers. When we look at 1800 to 2100, Disc suddenly jumps to the top. Paladin is second. Mistweaver still holding a solid spot in third, and for many players that considered Holy to be the best for so long, it's coming in fourth now. And it's intermingling with Druid and Shaman and Prez coming up on the heels as we get even higher rating. Prez starts to fall off more, which I think is expected. Paladin, I think, takes over with the hollowed ground, much like Red. It's just such a crazy talent. I can't believe people slept on it for so long. Just being able to apply consecration with judgment, and then your entire team gets to snare remove. They can run around the pillar freely, basically 100% of the time, just perma team freedom. It's so good. Most underrated mechanic on Ret and Holy right now, I think, to be able to abuse. And maybe that's why we start seeing mages fall off, is because this talent of Paladin can sort of almost neutralize the mage snares in a lot of cases. Disc still holds ahead of Holy, though, at this rating threshold, and this is like a very competitive rating threshold. And this is something I've seen players come into my chat. They've said like they used to play in a previous season or expansion, and they used to be like, let's say 2700, for example, and now they're struggling at 2K rating. You have to understand that 2K rating right now is pretty much equivalent to 20, whatever you were in the previous expansion, because the number of players has reduced since then, and the MMR that decides what rating you're going to get is based on the number of players playing. So don't beat yourself up if you're 2K or something like that. 2K is very high rated right now, given the current level of inflation. I've seen a lot of players that get really discouraged because of that. Do not give up because of that. And also MMR gets injected weekly. So by the end of the season, if you're 2K, even if you maintain a 50% win rate, you're probably going to be like 200 rating higher than that. So if there's some type of reward, and then assuming you don't get any better at the game. If you get better at the game over that time, you're probably going to be, popping over the 2400 bracket. It's a game of patience, honestly. I do think if you're 2K right now that you have a really good chance of getting above 2400 by the end of the season, given weekly inflation, but it's obviously going to take a little bit of time. But you can tell that the healers are reasonably balanced, with Prez maybe needing a little bit of a touch-up. And I think this is, I want to say it's a glitch, but Holy Priest actually drops to the bottom at 2400. It's not a glitch. It's not at 0. Prez is actually higher than Holy for a tiny bit of time here on this weekly update. And you can see Monk made it. This is how you know the game is balanced. And I've said it time and time again. When a spec like week to week with no changes can go from like bottom 3 to top 2, or bottom healer to now it's above 2 other healers, like you can tell that the game is really balanced. And I made a video talking about like the gameplay right now is probably close to the most balanced the game has ever been. So if you want to play for gameplay, definitely the best time to do it. Honestly, a great time to play any healer spec also if you're wanting to get faster Q times, because pretty much all viable, maybe with Paladin slightly edging out ahead now, given the mana builds they have to get in deep into the late game, and the new Hallowed Ground builds as well. But probably one of the best times to play the game is pretty much any spec at the moment, barring like a couple of those little minor tweaks that would have been nice to see for this update. Curious to see what they're going to do for 11.2, right? Because they got the game in this spot right now. What happens when they chuck in a bunch of new set bonuses? All the item level goes up. What type of new embellishments? They added corruptions this season. They're adding a belt also on Tuesday, tomorrow, which is going to change the meta possibly, as it's higher item level, and it comes with some different on-use effects. We haven't seen any PvP-specific nerfs to it either, and they just recently buffed the effects on those items. So it's possible that belt could actually be impactful in PvP a little bit later on, because I don't think it's 700 item level, at least the first week that you're going to be able to get it. But things are starting to mix up in the meta. Hopefully, I think they're doing a big update on Thursday or something like that regarding the reward restructure. I'm going to make a video covering that, because that's the thing that I've been looking forward to for the entire year, basically, because I'm hoping finally that's when they're going to discuss about how MMR works, how the rating is distributed, how rewards are going to be distributed, how are they going to incentivize beginner and kind of intermediate level players to play more. I still really think that they need to bring the Gladiator mount down to 1800. With maybe 50 wins above 1800. It's an unarmored version like the Dragonflight mounts that you used to get for dragon riding. And then as you gain rating in any PvP bracket, and maybe even other PvP avenues like World PvP, you'll unlock armor attachments that you can put on the dragon. So you can customize your Gladiator mount based on the type of content that you like to do from any of the content, right? Shoulder pads from 2v2, Soul Shuffle, Battleground Blitz, rated BGs, whatever it may be. There's an armor piece that you can go after, and you can basically customize that dragon to suit it towards whatever you want. And that way it's like a pretty solid mount that you can get immediately, just a base mount for new players, as opposed to 2400. Because right now you jump into 3v3 to get the Gladiator mount, it's like, bro, you want me to get 2,400? That's the only difference in rewards than any of the other brackets that I've played in. Like, that's too daunting. That's too daunting. So I think bringing the gladiator mount down to 1,800, 50 wins above 1,800. It's unarmored. You build the gladiator mount like the dirigible, where you go to the dirigible area and you can customize it. You can bring your gladiator mount there. Same idea could apply to Mythic Plus as well. If they're having troubles with incentivizing players within given brackets of their Mythic Plus score, bring down the mount with less armor pieces or customizable paint jobs or something that you can get depending on the rating that you're moving through. And I think that would help incentivize players and prevent them from dropping off or giving up in the first place if it's too big of a jump at that point. But that's it for the weekly breakdown. Not too much has changed other than maybe Destro is pretty surprising, and that the balance is honestly pretty solid, and Outlaw and Fire remain just at the bottom. So hope you guys enjoyed the update. I'll continue relaying the information news related to World of Warcraft here on the channel. So thank you, and I will see you in the next one.